afraid to venture outdoors, paranoid of everyone and everything. But I was still forced to enter the outside world and just cope. This is back in the 60s, back when going to a psychologist or something was a stigma my father couldn't have bared. What would the neighbors say? Or, you're just shy, you'll grow out of it. That's usually what my dad would say. By the time I was a teenager, I was suicidal. I desperately wanted to die to escape. But I was too afraid. Too afraid I'd end up in hell. Oh, did I mention I was raised a Catholic? I skipped out of school practically every day. In fact, sometimes I'd see guys in black suits looking at me wherever I go. I figured they were just truant officers seeing why I skipped out. But I was big for my age, so I could get away with saying, yeah, I'm 16. I don't go to school anymore. But usually I would just go to the library, spend a day reading. Sometimes I would go to the old cemeteries. I grew up in New Orleans, and they're famous for old cemeteries. And look around the above-ground tombs. Sometimes I would talk to them. Not talk so much, just ask a question, hoping they would answer me. What is death like? Should I be afraid to die? Is there a heaven or a hell? But, of course, I never got an answer. One day, I found myself at Lake Pontchartrain, walking around aimlessly when I saw some woods I never noticed before. It was right where Lakeshore Drive ended abruptly. No paths, just woods. One of the older parts of the city, I think. I walked for about 20 minutes when I came to a small cemetery. Well, small by New Orleans standards. I didn't see a sign or anything, so I don't know what it was called, but it looked old, real old. Some of the grave markers had death dates from the late 1700s. It was very unkept. Looked like no one had stepped foot there in decades. I walked past about a dozen graves before I noticed it. A large, odd-looking tree, almost in the center of the graveyard. About maybe 2 stories tall, bare of leaves, about 20 or so crooked branches that stretched out about 12 feet from around the trunk. Twigs of the branches reminded me of fingers of the old movie witches reaching out to grab me as they got closer to the screen. As I walked up to it, I started feeling a little uneasy, like I was being watched. I had this feeling something was next to me, and I turned to look. Nothing was there. So when I got right up to the tree, I could see the trunk was charred, kind of black and gray. Apparently it had caught fire at least once in its life. As I got right next to it, I could see axe and saw marks on its trunk. At least that's what they look like. Lots of them. Also, on the ground of the exposed roots, looked like long ago somebody did their best to get rid of this tree, but the tree had other ideas. It was awesomely creepy. Circled around the tree, and on the other side there was a small stone slate, I guess a foot by 1 foot, lying on the ground, about a yard from the trunk. It was covered in green mold and weather like it had been put there God knows how long ago. The words carved into it were hardly readable. So I got out my bandana, was able to rub some of the mold and other crap that was embedded in the letters. said, bolt of fear burned down my chest, causing me to step back. It said, the bliss of death may comfort thee neath the arms of the blighted tree. Well, I stood there for a second, trying to figure out what this meant. Something moved at the corner of my left eye. I turned my head and saw what looked like a silhouette or an outline of a person. Couldn't see any blurriness or distortion, just what looked like an outline. I didn't know what to make of it. Ghost, maybe. And then I heard a crack on my right side. Then I felt a stinging pain in my right wrist. I looked down to see blood jetting out of a slash right in the middle of my wrist. I just looked at it for a second, and then it hit me. I'm bleeding. What the hell am I going to do? So I remembered my bandana, and I went down to the ground to get it and wrapped my wrist up with it. And then another crack, and another slash, this time on my left wrist. But I saw what it was this time. One of the branches reached down and slit my wrist. And I'm in shock. I didn't know what to do. And all of a sudden, the silhouette looked more and more like a person. And then I saw another one. Then another one. And it's like I was almost surrounded by ghosts. The blood coursed from both my wrists. I started to hear voices. Low, whispering, echoing voices. Then more figures appeared. It looked like they were almost surrounding me. I could see faces on them. They had bright, pleasing smiles, soft, welcoming eyes. I began to feel weak. The torrent from my wrist began to flow. Then I tumbled to the black, blood-moistened ground, and the figures just stood over me as I lied on my back. I felt kind of calm. Then, in the distance, I saw a large, nefarious-looking figure dressed in a black suit. His skin was red, blotchy. His fingernails were long and yellow. His eyes were glimmering green. I knew who it was and what he wanted. The figures faded, still smiling. A tear of despair fell from my eye. Knowing I was going to a everlasting torment in the lake of fire. Then, to my surprise, he turned, his head shaking in annoyance, and then faded into a grayish haze. As my heart beat its last, I finally